May 1945. The Allied armies pushed deep into German territory. Contrary to many expectations, the German defenders did not resort to toxic chemical agents. That they had made preparations for the use of toxic chemical agents on a massive scale, however, can be seen from the following photographs taken by the American occupation forces. In the American occupation zone alone were stockpiles containing over 100,000 tons of chemical munitions. Over 611,000 artillery shells had been filled with the nerve agent GA. These aerial bombs were also loaded with GA. Most of the chemical munitions were destroyed by neutralization or burning, but for the nerve agents, this method was considered too hazardous. Instead, they were loaded aboard worn-out ships, towed far out to sea, and sunk.
Between 1918 and 1970, the U.S. alone dumped CW agents in waters worldwide on at least 74 occasions. These disposals were no small undertaking. If we look at one fair example from this tour, in 1945, the U.S. dumped 1,154 55-gallon drums of arsenic trichloride, 375 tons of Adamsite smoke candles, 75,852 4.2-inch distilled mustard shells, approximately 56,000 smoke canisters, and approximately 23,000 smoke projectiles. This represents only one of dozens of dumpings conducted off the U.S. coast.
So we're here doing our Emancipation Day special, speaking with one of the key persons. We're actually talking about an incident that happened in 1970, August 1970, the nerve gas leak and how that happened and the reaction of Bahamians at the time, particularly young Bahamians. So, Dr. Archer, you mentioned courage. I was just about to ask, did you have any kind of like trepidation or fear? Because I mean, this is a country that we're not independent at this point. You're going up against Great Britain. It's kind of like, do you really want to take on all-powerful America and the Queen and all this stuff? Was there any kind of like, maybe we should,
When you're 28, you can be very naive. I mean, looking back, I got interested in this topic because a good friend of mine, Bertram Knowles, said to me, by the way, a lot of people have been asking about that nerve gas incident so many years ago. You were involved in that? And I say, yeah, I was. And he said, can you find some data and papers on this? And I was really amazed that I had kept all the newspaper clippings. That's how I got going on this. And then one day, my associate, Trevon Patton, and his associate, Portia Duncanson, they saw these clippings. And they said, what about this nerve gas? Where did this happen? And so that they said, we need to know about this. We have absolutely no idea about this. But the question you asked is, was there any trepidation? Mm-hmm. In my case, I take very seriously my understanding of what the gospel is and who is Jesus Christ. I mean, Jesus died at the age of 33. I'm 71. I mean, at that time, I was 28. What I'm trying to say, if the greatest person who ever lived did most of his work between 30 and 33, mm-hmm. I mean, I guess I was very naive. I say, here I am at 28, years ago. Well, I should be walking the footsteps of Jesus, trying to get out there and make a difference for people. So that informs a lot of what I did. It just happens as this interview tap with you today is the 30th of July. 1993, exactly 20 years ago since the bill was signed to bring into being the autonomous, well, not the bill, but rather we had the signing of the deed of church union. The bill came in, the government bill, on the 2nd of July, 1993. And all the churches signed up to form this new independent Bahamian Methodist church on the 30th of July, 1993, exactly 20 years today. So that's another sort of emancipation-like event I was committed to. And really, in a way, it started pretty much like the nerve gas incident. I felt that here was something we needed to speak about. There was a dying Methodist church. Nobody was doing anything about it. We had a candidate offer for the ministry who was turned down, who happens to be the administrator in Cat Island. Donald Cornish today. He eventually didn't go through the ministry. And a friend of mine got together one night, and it's mentioned in this book, Foundation and Formation, that came out 2 months ago, about the whole, what happened in those 4 years leading up to it. And we said, we either have to get out of this church, we literally said that, or transform it, change it. And I think that's how people have to look at their country.
Yes.
Mahatma Gandhi said, you have to be the change you want to see in the world.
But I think for a lot of Bahamians and young persons, we don't want to be the change. We're waiting for a government or whoever to come and rescue us, unfortunately. But I definitely agree with you. But I want to backtrack a little bit about how you were talking when you met Trevon and his associate, about how they didn't know about the nerve gas. I didn't know about this nerve gas thing, and I want to know why. I mean, obviously, as a free-thinking adult, I can Google these things, but I'm just curious as to why, growing up, when you going to school in the Bahamas, you do social studies, you do history, and all they teach us about are the Arawaks, and maybe get a little paragraph about the mace and Sir Lyndon, and then that's it. Like, why aren't we being exposed to, and at a young age, which I think is important, these kind of events that I feel maybe could inspire or fuel young people or show us the kind of history we come from, which is a strong history. People try to make it as, Bahamians, we're very, I always hear people say, we're very passive. We never had to fight for anything. We're not like Haiti. Haiti had a war, they had a revolution. But that may be true. We may have never had a war, but we have come from a history where we have people like yourself who stood up for something, and that ended in having an effect. So why do you think it's almost like, I don't want to be like a conspiracy theorist, but it's almost like this information is kind of being hidden from us. Why aren't we being exposed to these things and taught that, hey, this is what happened? Especially when you have people who are part of active government now. They were a part of these events. So why do you think that may be?
I don't know what the modern curriculum looks like in the classrooms today, and you probably you exposed a lot more Bahamian history obviously than I was. When I went to, I had all British history, and that stuff. But I get the feeling that today, I certainly heard the Prime Minister saying a couple of weeks ago that they're going to focus a lot more with the 40th year of independence on indigenous, up and close Bahamian history. I'm on the Museums and Monuments Committee, for instance, and we're trying to do some things with our monuments. You see at the water tower. Did you see? I don't know if you don't go.
Yeah, I saw.
You see the 40th anniversary.
They did something special, but I saw a picture on Facebook.
So
actually,
I have a hunch that what I know about a lot of the younger generation, like you ladies and gentlemen, I believe you're going to really make a difference. And I think it's going to be a lot through social media, your photographic technology, your ability to combine English, your use of English and the electronic media. I guess I'm turning around and I'm saying I don't know why it hasn't happened more in the past, but there's certainly a lot of signals I know from the government today. And when I listen to young people like you, I believe that's going to change. I'm a lot more hopeful now than I've ever been.
Really?
About creating, looking into more Bahamian things, truly Bahamian. Mind you, I must say, and it's true what you say, a lot of wonderful things and dynamic things happened in the past. For instance, as I say, this was pre-independence by 3 years. And again, in that paper, there was a big protest. It was led, there were talks between the Bahamians, American and British officials, led by the Honorable Arthur D. Hanna. And they protested vociferously this dumping of nerve gas, the government of the day. And I have the meetings there in the paper, what happened, and their statements. The Honorable Paul Adley, there were other parties, Holland Smith and his People's Party. And they were all very active and even the UBP at the time with Jeffrey Johnstone, the UBP was still very much a party. But they all protested it, and they all had their bit in. I thought it was very dynamic. In fact, it seemed to me, you're probably right. We seem to be more energized and
more
into
I definitely
things
feel like
that day
being at this incident and hearing from you. I mean, I hear that you're hopeful, but honestly, to be quite honest, I feel like the young people of this country, we have so much potential. Definitely. I feel like we have the most talented people in the world. We're just as smart. We're just as sharp. But the motivation outside of yourself, I feel like it's not there. I feel like there's personal motivations like, oh, I want to do this. I want to be a doctor. I want to be a lawyer. But when it comes to the country, where the country is going, I feel like people aren't really concerned about that. If something doesn't directly affect them, if crime doesn't directly affect me, then, I feel like if we had a nerve gas thing now, people would be like, well, like with the BP, the oil spill, when that happened, I was going crazy. I was kind of like, this is something very serious. And people made a joke out of it. And I feel like people are like, well, if I'm not a fisherman and that's not affecting my fish, then whatever. It seems like people wait for things to come to their doorstep. And I feel like we need to take a look at what you guys did and we need the zest. I feel like it doesn't exist.
It's interesting, as I sit and listen to you, mm-hmm. I tend to put more myself in your shoes mm-hmm. today. I figure young people today, just to survive, is so much more difficult than it was when I was your age.
You think so? Why is that?
Well, no, by that I mean, what does a lot cost in the Bahamas, for instance, to build a house? To really get going. I guess I don't want to blame all this stuff on materialism, and mm-hmm. I think it's a part of modernity, just trying to make it. Mm-hmm. To be just a regular middle-class human being. I guess I'm trying to say, don't be so hard on yourself. Mm-hmm. It is enormous just to keep up to we all basically want to be middle class, don't we? Mm-hmm. I mean, at least middle class. Exactly. Yeah. But just to be comfortable is a terrific thing, because more and more people, to make it, you're not going to be in the middle class. You're probably going to end up being poor. Mm-hmm. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is, I think just trying to survive today, to keep up with eating well, living a decent life, it calls for so much more eeconomic power and survival power.
Well, that's what it is.
And I believe what happens is you just feel you're just trying to keep up, and I don't have too much time to protest.
I agree.
I guess I'm trying to be a little. I don't think you're any worse than we were. I think there's certain environmental, i.e., social, economic, and the like, today that makes it enormously difficult. And so I guess it's easier to tap a thing on a mouse and say, I'm going to protest this week, than actually physically call some people together and get together in somebody's house and organize a social protest on the street.
That survival point is definitely, me, the producer, we had that conversation at the studio with someone before, when it's like, that is fair to say, the average Bahamian, you honestly just trying to think, okay, how am I going to pay my light bill and stuff? I need to set aside for this, that, maybe save up. So really, your thoughts are consumed with that. You can't really be consumed with.
I mean, let's compare, for instance, mm-hmm. 1970, or rather 1970, mm-hmm. with where are we? 2013. Yeah. Just about all of those university students, the Bernard Nottages, and I'm just giving an example, the medical doctors, for instance, who were off in UWI, had I'm almost certain they had full scholarships. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm not sure about that, but certainly, no, hold on, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. I know in independence, as we came independent 3 years ago, and in the earliest years of the first government, that is the PLP administration, for 10 years or so, these scholarships, you just could get a scholarship to go to school almost just like that.
Wow.
These were paid government scholarships.
What a difference.
It's true. Today,
43 years makes...
You see the difference today?
Oh, you don't have to tell me, Dr. Archer.
So when you came home in summer,
mm-hmm.
you didn't have to worry about, like, for instance, a lot of kids who come home today. There are a lot of people coming home today. I know our producer's brother. And he's looking for a job to make it, and he hasn't found one mm-hmm. for the summer months. In those days, not only was school paid for, in my case, my university and college, working for in my seminary years, it was entirely paid for by the church. So I had no financial obligations to taking care of my education. So when I came home in summer, I could do these things like protest in a way that's very difficult for a young person coming home.
No.
Maybe I'm making excuses, but I'm really trying to put myself in your shoes.
Yeah.
I have a daughter who went through that. And
well, I'm going through the same
was,
thing now because like I said, I'm off to school in New York, and now I'm supposed to get my scholarship renewed and this and that. And now, the country, I guess, is going through a tough time, I guess. So they're saying the budget, this and that, and next thing. So it is kind of different being a 21st century Bahamian young person.
It's tough. And so I'm saying, I think what you're doing now and the young people I'm seeing, certainly in social media, I stand in awe and wonder of them. I say, how do they do it?
We need more people like you, Dr. Archer, because, first of all, I feel like it's one thing for the more mature folks to tell us something, but when you see the person actually living that and that they've lived that, one, that's inspiring, and two, just like your attitude and your outlook towards young people is not a very I guess condemning kind of outlook. So I feel like the young people, we need that. We crave that. We want direction. This is a confusing time in most of our lives, and we just need that kind of guidance. But sometimes, at least for me, in like conversations I have with my friends, it's like a common thing. It's like we feel like a lot of the older folks is like they have their hands on the reins and they will not let it go. It's like they will go down into the ground, and it's like when they step off the scene, it's like, what's gonna happen to us? Because we have no training, no apprenticeship, nothing like that. So it's kind of like a deer in headlights kind of situation. We're just coming onto the scene like, kind of don't know what to do here. It's really, really tough.